I counted them. 1, 2, 3. By the time his fist connected with my jaw for the 30th time, blood filled my mouth, and my reading glasses lay shattered on the hardwood floor. But my mind had turned crystal clear. My son Christopher thought he was teaching a stubborn old veteran a lesson in front of his laughing wife. He thought his youth and rage gave him power over me. He didn't know that while he was busy playing tough guy, I was mentally drafting his discharge papers from my life. I am Andrew Reynolds. I'm 58 years old. I spent 28 years building defense systems for the Navy, fighting bureaucrats and budget cuts, earning every dollar through security clearances and government contracts. And this is the story of how I destroyed my son's entire world in 72 hours, while he sat at his desk completely unaware that his life was about to be demolished like a condemned building. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for, stick around. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. But let me back up and tell you how we got to those 30 slaps, because this didn't happen overnight. This was 5 years in the making. It was a Tuesday night in February, and the Virginia beach wind was cutting through everything like a blade. I parked my 10-year-old pickup 2 blocks from the house because the driveway was packed with leased BMWs and Audis belonging to people who'd never earned a security clearance in their lives. The house, my house, though Christopher didn't know that, sat on a quiet street in a neighborhood full of military families and defense contractors. I walked against that wind, carrying a small wrapped package. It was Christopher's 31st birthday party, and I hadn't missed one yet, despite the growing tension between us over the past year. The house looked impressive from the street. It should. I'd bought it 5 years ago for $850,000 cash after landing a major contract with the Navy's submarine division. 3 bedrooms, 2-car, garage, nice yard, perfect for a young family starting out. I let Christopher and his wife Jennifer live there rent-free. I told them it was their home, their fresh start. I never mentioned that the deed was held by Reynolds Holdings, LLC, a company I owned completely. To them, it was a gift from Dad. To me, it was a test of character. They were failing that test spectacularly. I rang the doorbell. The bass from inside was shaking the front door, some hip-hop song with lyrics that would make a sailor blush. Jennifer opened it after the 3rd ring. She was 27 years old, Instagram pretty in that manufactured way, holding a glass of champagne that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "Oh, it's you," she said. Not, "Hi, Dad," or "Thanks for coming," just, "Oh, it's you." She didn't step aside immediately either. Her eyes scanned my navy peacoat, good quality wool that had lasted me 15 years, but it showed its age. It didn't match the aesthetic she was building for her, social media content. "Happy birthday to Christopher," I said, stepping past her before she could find an excuse to turn me away. The house was packed with his co-workers from Atlantic Defense Solutions, the government contracting firm where he worked as a sales director. At least that's what his business card said. I'd helped him get that job through my contacts, back when I still believed he was trying to build something real. The crowd was the usual mix: sales directors and business development managers who thought they were hot shots because they had interim security clearances and knew how to talk to Pentagon procurement officers. They dressed like investment bankers, but most had never served a day in uniform. I spotted Christopher near the fireplace, working the crowd like a politician. He looked polished on the surface: $2,000 suit, perfect haircut, crystal whiskey tumbler in his hand. But I'd spent decades evaluating personnel for security risks in defense contracting. I could read the signs that others missed. He was sweating despite the February cold. His eyes kept darting to his phone every 30 seconds. He was laughing too loud at his own jokes, dominating conversations. Classic signs of a man under serious financial pressure. I'd seen it before with junior officers who got in over their heads with gambling debts. What I didn't know yet was how deep Christopher had dug his hole. And I definitely didn't know about the lies he'd been telling about his military service. See, Christopher had never served, never even tried to enlist. But somewhere along the way, he'd started telling people he was a Navy veteran like his old man. Started slow, just letting people assume when they saw us together. Then it escalated. He bought military surplus clothing, started using veteran discounts at restaurants, even had fake DD-214 discharge papers made up that he'd bought online from some scammer in Alabama. I'd heard rumors around the military community in Virginia Beach, but I'd been ignoring them, hoping it was just people getting confused, or maybe Christopher was just letting people assume things without actually lying. I was wrong about that too. I approached him across the crowded living room. "Happy birthday, son." The room went quieter. His contractor buddies looked at me, the older guy in the worn coat among their designer suits. I was the anomaly, the guy who reminded them that their security clearances and government contracts came from guys like me who'd actually served, actually earned our stripes. "Dad," Christopher said, his voice tight with something I couldn't quite identify. Stress, maybe, or annoyance. "You made it." There was no warmth in it, no genuine happiness to see me. Just acknowledgement, like I was a delivery driver who'd shown up at the right address. I handed him the small package I'd been carrying. "Something from your grandfather." Christopher took it, weighing it in his hands. He tore off the brown paper wrapping without much ceremony, revealing a worn leather watch case. Inside was his grandfather's Navy watch, a 1952 Timex that had been through 3 deployments in the Pacific. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have diamonds or gold plating. It was about heritage, about service, about understanding that time is earned through commitment and sacrifice. My father had given it to me when I graduated from the Naval Academy. I'd planned to give it to Christopher when he accomplished something worth celebrating, finishing college, getting married, starting a real career. But he was 31 now, and those moments had never come. Tonight felt like my last chance to pass on something meaningful. Christopher opened the case and stared at the watch for a long moment. Then he laughed. Not a warm laugh of appreciation, but a short, cruel bark that cut through the party noise like a gunshot. "Thanks, Dad," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Very vintage." He tossed the case onto a side table that was crowded with empty glasses and used napkins. The case slid toward the edge, and I had to grab it before it fell into a trash can filled with wrapping paper from other gifts. Jennifer giggled from beside him. "Oh, honey, maybe we can sell it at a consignment shop. Vintage military stuff is trendy right now." I felt something twist in my chest. Not anger yet, disappointment. The deep, bitter kind that comes from watching someone you love reveal who they really are underneath all your hopes and expectations. I picked up the watch case and put it back in my coat pocket. "Can we talk privately for a minute?" Christopher's expression changed instantly. The fake smile vanished, replaced by something harder. He grabbed my arm, his grip tighter than necessary, and steered me away from his guests. "Sure, Dad. Let's talk." He pulled me toward his home office, what used to be the den when I'd helped him set up the house. I'd built those shelves myself, thinking he might fill them with books about leadership or history. Instead, they held gaming equipment, energy drink cans, and a collection of military surplus items he'd never earned the right to own. He pushed me inside and locked the door behind us. The party noise became muffled. It was just us now, and I could see the sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool February air. "I need money, Dad," he said without any preamble. "No, how are you doing? No, thanks for the watch." Straight to business. I looked at him carefully. The expensive suit, the perfect haircut, the watch on his wrist that he claimed was a gift from his unit commander, though he'd never served a day in uniform. "You have a job, Christopher. You live in an $850,000 house, rent-free." "It's not enough," he snapped, starting to pace like a caged animal. "I owe people, Dad. Bad people. I need $95,000 tonight." $95,000. I let that number sink in. That was more than a lot of families made in a year. Gambling. "It was an investment that went wrong," he lied smoothly. He'd always been a good liar, even as a kid. "Online trading. Cryptocurrency stuff. You wouldn't understand." But I understood plenty. I'd seen this exact scenario play out with young officers who got in over their heads. The lies, the desperation, the escalating requests for help. "Which site, Christopher? Which casino?" His face flushed red. "It doesn't matter. Just write the check, Dad. You've got it. I know you're sitting on all that defense contract money." I did have it. 28 years of careful saving, smart investments, living below my means while building something for the future. But giving it to him would be like pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. "You need help, son. Real help. Counseling. Gamblers Anonymous has meetings right here in Virginia Beach." He stopped pacing and stared at me with pure hatred. It was a look I'd never seen before. Not from my own child. "You're going to give me that money," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Or you'll never see us again. You'll die alone in that crappy apartment." I stood up from the chair I'd been sitting in. "I'm leaving." He moved to block the door. "You're not leaving until you write the check." I tried to step around him, but he shoved me back into the chair. Hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me and sent pain shooting through my ribs. "Write the check, old man," he said. That's when the office door opened. Jennifer slipped in through the side entrance that connected to the master bedroom. She had her phone out, already recording. "Tell him, Chris," she said, her voice sweet with poison. "Show Daddy what happens when he doesn't support family." I looked at them both, my son and daughter-in-law, people I'd helped, supported, given everything to. They looked hungry, predatory. "No," I said quietly. Christopher's face turned a color I'd never seen before. Dark red, almost purple with rage. He grabbed my collar with his left hand and raised his right. "You think you're tough because you served in the Navy?" he screamed. "You think that old uniform makes you special? You're nothing, Dad. You're just a wallet. That's all you've ever been to us." The first slap came fast and sharp. It wasn't a punch. It was meant to humiliate, not just hurt. My head snapped to the side. "One." I looked back at him calmly. "Is that all you have?" He hit me again, harder this time. My glasses flew off my face and skittered across the hardwood floor. "2. Write it," he screamed. "No. 3. 4. 5. He was losing control now. This wasn't about the money anymore. He was hitting his own conscience, trying to beat down the part of him that knew this was wrong. Jennifer was laughing behind her phone screen. "Get a close-up of his face," she told Christopher. "This is going viral." 6, 7, 8. I didn't raise my hands to protect myself. I didn't fight back. I sat there and took it. I needed this. I needed to feel the physical pain so I could finally kill the emotional attachment I still had for him. 9, 10, 11. My lip split. Blood dripped onto my white shirt, staining it red. 12, 13. He was breathing hard now. Hitting someone is exhausting work, even when they're not fighting back. "Why won't you just die?" he screamed between strikes. "Why won't you have a heart attack and leave us the inheritance? Do you know how much easier that would make everything?" 14, 15, 16. I focused on a spot on the wall behind him. A framed photo of Christopher in a military dress uniform. a uniform he'd bought online, complete with fake ribbons and rank insignia. He'd posted it on social media, claiming it was from his deployment ceremony. 17, 18, 19, 20. My left eye was swelling shut now, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. 21, 22. Jennifer moved closer with the phone. Kick him out, Chris. He's bleeding on our rug. The expensive rug. 23, 24, 25. Christopher was slowing down. His hand was red and stinging from hitting me repeatedly. 26, 27, 28. 3 more strikes, each one weaker than the last. 29. He stepped back, wiping his bloody hand on his pants. 30. The final slap was almost gentle, a mocking pat on my swollen cheek. Get out, he panted. Get out of my house. Don't come back without that check. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaky, but they held me. I found my broken glasses on the floor and put them on. The world looked fractured through the cracked lens, which seemed appropriate. 30, I said quietly. What? Christopher asked, confused. 30 times. I counted every single one. I walked to the door. And Christopher, this isn't your house. I didn't look back as I left the office. The party was still going in the living room, but conversation stopped when people saw me. Blood on my shirt, eyes swelling shut, lip split like I'd been in a car wreck. I walked through them like I was walking through fog. I got to my truck and sat in the dark, parking lot for a long moment. The heater wasn't working great, and my breath fogged up the windows. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd memorized years ago. Matthew Torres, came the voice on the other end. Matthew, it's Andrew Reynolds. I need to activate Clause 12 of the Reynolds Holdings Agreement. Silence. Matthew knew exactly what Clause 12 meant. We'd written it into the company structure 5 years ago as a nuclear option, immediate liquidation of assets if the beneficiary violated the terms of occupancy. Andrew, it's 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Are you sure about this? I touched my split lip and looked at the blood on my fingertip. My son just beat me 30 times while his wife recorded it, Matthew. He told me to die so he could get his inheritance easier. I want that house sold within 72 hours. Jesus Christ, Andrew, Matthew whispered on the other end of the phone. What happened? The short version? My son just proved he's exactly who I was afraid he'd become. I started the truck and pulled out of the neighborhood. Can you do it or not? I can do it. But Andrew, this is scorched earth. Once we liquidate Reynolds Holdings assets, there's no going back. No reconciliation. No family dinners. I looked in the rearview mirror at the house where my son was probably still partying, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. There's no family left to reconcile with, Matthew. Make the calls. I'll need 2 hours to wake up the right people. Walsh Demolition owes me favors. They buy distressed properties for land value, cash deals, fast closings. But Andrew, you'll lose at least $300,000 in equity. I don't care about the money. I want that house gone. And I want Christopher to understand that actions have consequences. Understood. I'll call you back by 2 a.m. with details. I hung up and drove to my apartment downtown. It wasn't much, a 1-bedroom place I'd rented after selling my family home when my wife passed 13 years ago. But it was mine, paid for with money I'd earned, not given to me by someone else. I cleaned my wounds in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back was a mess. Swollen eye, split lip, bruises forming across my cheekbone. But for the first time in years, I felt clear about what needed to happen. At 1:47 a.m., Matthew called back. It's done. Walsh Demolition will pay $520,000 cash for the property. They can close Thursday morning at 10 a.m. They're buying it for the land. They'll clear the house and build a duplex. What about the occupants? That's where it gets interesting. The Reynolds Holdings occupancy agreement has a clause about immediate termination for violence against the property owner. Christopher's legally a trespasser as of tonight. Walsh's security team can handle the eviction. Thursday morning, I sat in my truck across the street from the house, watching the show unfold. At exactly 10:15 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. Walsh Demolition's crew didn't mess around. They had bolt cutters, steel security doors, and a dumpster truck. The lead guy, Stephen Walsh himself, walked up to the front door and tried the handle. Locked, obviously. He didn't knock politely. He used a hydraulic door spreader, the kind firefighters use in emergencies. 30 seconds later, the front door was hanging open. The house alarm started screaming immediately, high-pitched, ear-splitting sound that could wake the dead. But Walsh's crew just kept working. They'd done this before. Jennifer came running out in a bathrobe, screaming, "What are you doing? This is my house!" Stephen Walsh was a big guy, former Marine, the kind of contractor who didn't take nonsense from anyone. He held up a legal document in a plastic sleeve. "Ma'am, as of 10 a.m. this morning, this property belongs to Walsh Demolition. You're trespassing. You have 30 minutes to remove personal items before we secure the building." "You can't do this!" Jennifer shrieked. "My husband owns this house." "No, ma'am, he doesn't. Reynolds Holdings LLC owned it. They sold it to us this morning. Cash sale, all legal." That's when the real show started. Jennifer called Christopher at work, screaming into her phone. I could hear her from across the street. "They're stealing our house. Get home now." The demolition crew worked fast. They weren't packing items carefully in boxes. They were doing debris removal. Furniture went into the dumpster. Clothes got stuffed into garbage bags. Jennifer's designer purses, her makeup collection, Christopher's gaming setup, all of it treated like trash. Because legally, that's what it was. Anything left in the house after the sale belonged to the new owners, and Walsh Demolition's policy was simple: clear it out fast. Christopher's BMW came screaming around the corner at 11:30 a.m., tires smoking as he hit the brakes. He jumped out, still wearing his work clothes, and ran toward the house. Stephen Walsh stepped in front of him. "Sir, you need to stop right there." "That's my stuff," Christopher yelled, pointing at the dumpster full of his belongings. "You can't throw away my stuff." "Yes, sir, we can. Property was sold as is with all contents. Anything inside belongs to us now." Christopher looked around wildly. He saw the steel security door being installed over the front entrance. He saw his neighbors watching from their yards. He saw his entire life being treated like garbage. Then he spotted my truck across the street. He ran toward me, slipping on the icy pavement, nearly falling. He pounded on my driver's side window with both fists. "Dad! Dad, stop them! What did you do?" I rolled the window down 2 inches, just enough to talk. "I sold the house, Christopher." "You can't sell my house. It was never your house. It was Reynolds Holdings' house. I'm the sole owner of Reynolds Holdings. I can sell whatever I want." His face went through about 6 different emotions in 5 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, panic, and finally understanding. "Where am I supposed to live? Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at him through my cracked glasses. This man who'd hit me 30 times while his wife laughed. This man who'd told me to die so he could get my money easier. "I don't know, Christopher, but I hear the homeless shelters fill up fast in February. You better start making calls." I rolled the window up and drove away, leaving him standing in the street watching a dumpster truck haul away his old life. But the house was just the beginning. See, I'd made some phone calls that morning, too. Christopher's boss at Atlantic Defense Solutions got a very interesting email about employee background verification issues. Turns out, lying about military service on a government security clearance application is a federal crime. By Thursday afternoon, Christopher didn't just lose his house. He lost his job, too. The security clearance investigation moved faster than I expected. When you lie on federal paperwork, especially about military service, The government doesn't mess around. Christopher's interim secret clearance was revoked Friday morning. By Monday, Atlantic Defense Solutions had terminated his employment for cause, which meant no severance, no unemployment benefits, and a permanent black mark that would follow him to any other defense contractor in the Hampton Roads area. But Christopher's problems were just getting started. See, when I'd sent that video Jennifer recorded to the authorities, I hadn't just sent it to the local police. I'd sent it to the FBI's Elder Abuse Task Force, the VA's Fraud Investigation Unit, and the Defense Security Service. Hitting your 58-year-old veteran father 30 times while fraudulently claiming stolen valor benefits gets a lot of federal agencies' attention real fast. The federal charges came down exactly 2 weeks later. Elder abuse of a senior citizen, veteran benefit fraud, falsifying government security, documents. Jennifer's video, the one she'd thought would humiliate me into writing a check, became Exhibit A in a federal criminal prosecution. Christopher tried to hire a real lawyer at first, but here's the thing about being unemployed with massive gambling debts. You don't qualify for free legal help if you theoretically have family assets. And Christopher's theoretical asset was me, his father, who everyone in Norfolk assumed would bail him out like I always had before. They were dead wrong about that assumption. I got my first collect call from Christopher 3 days before his arraignment. The automated system announced it was from Norfolk County Jail and asked if I'd accept the charges for the call. I hung up without hesitation. He called back 47 times over the next 2 days. I never answered a single call. The trial was quick and brutal. When you have high-definition video evidence of someone methodically counting slaps while beating a senior citizen, there's not much room for legal maneuvering. Christopher's court-appointed attorney, he finally qualified for free representation after proving he was completely broke, tried to argue temporary stress and alcohol impairment. The federal prosecutor played Jennifer's entire video for the jury, all 3 minutes and 47 seconds of it. Every slap, every cruel laugh from Jennifer behind the camera, every vicious word Christopher said about wanting me to die for the inheritance money. The jury deliberated for exactly 43 minutes. The judge sentenced Christopher to 8 years in federal prison, plus 3 years supervised probation. Jennifer filed for divorce before the sentencing hearing was even finished. She'd already moved back to Ohio to live with her parents, and the last I heard through my private investigator, she was working retail at a Target and had deleted all her social media accounts. But honestly, this story isn't really about Christopher's punishment. It's about what happened after the dust settled. 2 months after the trial concluded, I was sitting in my apartment reading the newspaper when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Maria Rodriguez, a name I hadn't seen pop up in over 2 years. Mr. Reynolds, this is Maria, Christopher's first wife, Daniel's mother. Daniel, my grandson. The 8-year-old boy I hadn't been allowed to see in 2 years because Christopher had completely cut off all contact after Maria divorced him for cheating. Christopher had weaponized access to Daniel, using visits with his grandson as leverage to control our relationship and keep the money flowing. Maria, I said, my voice catching slightly. How are you? How's Daniel doing? We're managing okay. But Daniel's been asking about you constantly. He saw something on the local news about Christopher's trial, and he wanted to know if his grandpa was hurt, if you were okay. My throat tightened up. This kid, who'd been deliberately kept away from me for 2 years, was worried about my well-being after everything that had happened. Can I see him? I asked quietly. I was really hoping you'd ask that. That Saturday afternoon, I picked up Daniel for lunch at his favorite diner. He was noticeably bigger than I remembered, with gaps where he'd lost baby teeth, wearing a Norfolk Admirals hockey jersey that was slightly too big for him. Grandpa Andy, he said, wrapping his arms around my legs in a fierce hug. Are you really okay? Mom said Dad did something bad and hurt you. I knelt down to his eye level on the restaurant sidewalk. "I'm completely fine, buddy. But your dad made some very bad choices, and now he has to face the consequences of those choices. Is he ever coming back home?" I thought carefully about how to answer that question honestly, but age-appropriately. "Not for a very long time, Daniel. But what happened isn't your fault in any way, and it doesn't change how much your grandpa loves you." We spent that entire afternoon at a Norfolk Tides baseball game. Daniel chattered constantly about elementary school, about his best friends, about wanting to learn how to throw a proper curveball like the pitchers. Normal, healthy 8-year-old conversation. He didn't ask for expensive toys or video games or money. He just wanted to spend quality time with his grandfather. That night, after dropping Daniel off, I made a life-changing decision. I liquidated all the remaining assets from Reynolds Holdings, LLC, and established the Reynolds Veterans Scholarship Fund. The fund provides full college tuition funding for children of legitimate military families, real military families who understand service and sacrifice, not the fake stolen valor families Christopher had tried to pretend we were. Daniel was designated as the fund's very first recipient, even though he won't need the money for another 10 years. But the fund will pay for his complete education, and hopefully it'll help dozens of other kids who truly understand what military service and family honor actually represent. Christopher writes me letters from federal prison in Kentucky every few weeks. They arrive in standard prison-issue envelopes, and I always recognize his handwriting immediately. I don't open them anymore. I know exactly what they say. Desperate apologies when he needs commissary money, bitter accusations when he doesn't get any response from me. Instead of reading his letters, I spend my time properly with Daniel. I pick him up from school twice every week. I take him to Orioles games whenever they play in Baltimore. I'm teaching him about genuine integrity, about earning respect through actions, about understanding the critical difference between fear-based obedience and genuine respect. Last weekend, Daniel asked me about the Navy watch, his great-grandfather's 1952 Timex that I'd tried to give Christopher on that terrible birthday night. "Can I have it someday, Grandpa Andy?" "When you've truly earned it," I told him seriously. "When you've accomplished something meaningful that proves you understand exactly what that watch represents." He nodded with complete seriousness. This kid understands honor in a way his father never did, and probably never will. Sometimes people around Norfolk ask me if I regret completely destroying Christopher's life, if I wish I'd just written that $95,000 check and kept the family peace. I touch the tiny scar on my lower lip, the only remaining physical reminder of those 30 methodical slaps, and tell them the absolute truth. You cannot buy genuine respect with money. You cannot purchase real integrity with cash. And you absolutely cannot successfully negotiate with people who see you as nothing more than a walking bank account with a heartbeat. I didn't destroy Christopher's life through revenge. I simply stopped protecting him from the natural consequences of his own destructive choices. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't that my adult son was willing to physically hurt me for gambling money. The hardest lesson was realizing that I'd been emotionally hurting him for years by making his life too easy, by never allowing him to fail naturally, by constantly rescuing him from every single mistake and poor decision. Federal prison isn't cruel punishment. It's the first real boundary Christopher has ever encountered in his entire 31 years of life. Maybe somewhere during those 8 years of forced sobriety and mandatory reflection, he'll finally discover the honorable man I always hoped he could become. But I won't be sitting around waiting for that transformation. I'm 58 years old. I have a grandson to raise properly this time, a veterans scholarship fund to operate, and a life to live completely on my own terms. Those 30 slaps ended the precise moment I stopped counting them as a victim and started calculating my response as a strategist. Justice isn't the same thing as revenge. Justice is what finally happens when love gets smart enough and strong enough to say no. The most destructive thing you can do to someone you love isn't refusing to help them. It's helping them so much that they never learn to help themselves.